Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from steamy Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and occasionally even, including today, north of the border. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this here is the podcast for you. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello, I'm Dan Whedon, and we have a very special and unique show today. It's what we're calling the Fifth Week Hosts Only Show. Listen, before I dive into that, let me tell you, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, which I think is James' favorite. He's supposed to do some research on it, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including Atlanta, Charleston, South Carolina, Central PA, Boston. We're just getting started in Knoxville and Columbus. Today, we have gathered all our hosts, unfortunately, except for Algelyn Sperber. She could not make it. We're going to be gathering to talk about a very important thing: networking in a virtual business environment that we're in, a virtual and digital business world. So today we're going to try to offer you some advice, sharing some of the things that we are doing around what the pandemic has accelerated. So first, let me welcome, in order as I see them, Michelle Barnberger, Phil Simchich, and James Alberson. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Dan.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Hey.
So listen, just kind of as we kind of get started on this, let me throw out a quick question to each of you for you to individually answer. I think we all saw digital and video like Zoom. I mean, these were all in place before March of 2020, but at the drop of a hat, so to speak, all of a sudden, things change dramatically for your individual business, because your business, not only are you hosts of the podcast, you're also business owners. For your individual business, what has been the biggest shift for you when it comes to networking and communicating both with clients and prospective clients? Michelle, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. We had talked for a couple of years about shifting our consultations from phone to video, whether that was Skype or Zoom or, the different tools that were out there, WebEx. And it never felt natural. Most people tended to shy away from it. And so we never really got much traction on it. And I think that the opportunity that we have going forward is that these consultations, these conversations with new clients actually have more connection through Zoom or Teams or your tool of choice than your traditional pick up the phone and call someone. So I think that default may be beneficial in the longer term. And we've used it extensively. And maybe just now we're seeing people who are defaulting to no video because people are, I think, just tired of looking at each other all day long or looking at themselves all day long. But I think it's a tool that will definitely remain in our repertoire of how do we connect with people better.
So Phil, I know you come to us from Regina, Saskatchewan in Canada. Heck, you can't even cross the border otherwise. And I know you have many clients in the United States. So you've been really kind of virtually networking for quite a while. But how has last year influenced your business?
Well, yeah, in March of 2020, on a Monday morning, I was supposed to fly to Seattle and work with a client. And that weekend, the border got shut down. So we ended up doing that project virtually. And it probably took a little bit longer, but I was still able to use Zoom mostly to have one-on-ones, and some were phone calls. And so I was still able to connect personally with people, have good conversations. It was new and different for everybody. And the project ended up being quite successful. So that was a bit of a confidence boost that, hey, we can deliver a major project like a management reorganization virtually. So that's a positive. Nobody's really camera shy anymore. So that's a positive. It's easy to do and acceptable. The negatives are that as consultants, we can't see the environment and we can't see the management team interacting in their natural environment. So if I'm doing a plant tour, I can't see who should or shouldn't be driving the forklift, for example. Like, why do we have a manager driving the forklift? And so we're missing that from the plant tour or any business on site. But the virtual has become a little bit easier and more acceptable and global, really. So for the global clients, it's really easy to reach out and connect with people.
James, you are in the sales game. I mean, Sandler Training, that's that's what you do. Talk about your own business though, and some of the things that maybe you had to almost immediately put into place that you're still using today.
Well, exactly. And I'll hit on two things. As far as the business and training, one of the things that the flip was switched immediately was, the delivery of the training and the coaching. Obviously, it all went virtual. And, there are some who did it seamlessly, some who had some difficulties. Fortunately, I was already using Zoom for hybrid training, if you will, some live, some in person. And also some maybe for people on the other side of the state. So it just, it was just a matter of kind of stepping up your presentation, your infrastructure of your studio, your makeshift studio, and really trying not to lose a bit of that. So that's one thing. But from the standpoint of networking, one of the things that I wanted to mention, I'm sure a lot of people discovered, is that it really increased your networking substantially from your reach, if you will. And a couple of networking groups that I belong to, and actually Dan and Michelle, you belong to this one as well. Whereas it before was in person, you go to these in-person meetings. Now with Zoom, it expanded it really nationally, and you'd have people joining from Chicago or wherever it is. So I think that positively affected the number of connections that people had, and obviously, hopefully, business that came about from that. And then the other aspect was just the frequency with which you could do it. Well, now you eliminate traffic and transit time. And now, granted, some people got tired of going from one Zoom meeting at the top of the hour to the next, but in some cases, it doubled, even tripled the amount of networking you were able to do. So that's one of the things that I saw. I think that was a positive. Obviously, the negative, as I think everyone has mentioned, you lose that in-person touch and that maybe a little bit of the body language that you could note when you're in person, that maybe steered the conversation one way or the other, whether it was a customer or a potential customer or just a networking partner. So obviously there are pluses and minuses, but I think those two big pluses of your reach and the frequency with which you could do it, I think benefited quite a few people.
So James, I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to go back in reverse order. This will be like a snake draft in a fantasy football league. We're gonna stick with James. You get to answer two in a row. Listen, you brought something up.
I love when I have that position in fantasy football. Okay.
I know. So listen, you brought something up because we just talked about our networking group and provisors. And I can tell you that for me, I've loved that for the exact reasons that you talk about. Yet I want you to talk a little bit about the mindset, because even today, I hear people who are in a position of sales in some form or fashion who haven't really still embraced, they still think, I gotta be in front of a person. I can't really sell if I'm not in front of the person. Now, the reality is I think in all of our cases, we've found that, we've done fine. We've made so you can do it. But speak to those people who maybe are, I hate to say the words old school, but really kind of have to make this mindset shift about, do I have to literally be sitting across from somebody?
Mm-hmm. So I want to pick Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin. Oh, I'm sorry. I was still in a fantasy football mode.
Well, if you pick Doug Baldwin, that's bad. He's been retired for 3 years.
You know what? Hey, I was on the fly. I just wanted a quarterback and a wide receiver. So to your question, though, I forgot about that totally. You know, in Sandler business, it's what we call head trash, basically. You know, oh, I can't, it's a belief you have that really has no true basis for existing. No, I need to be in person in order to make the sale, and I can't do this virtually, and I certainly can't prospect virtually. What do you mean? They don't even want to see me in person. Why would they want to see me on screen? All of those things are mental barriers, mental hurdles that you have to get over. You have to deal with the hand or play the hand you're dealt. And then once you do and you get rid of that, you realize that, well, hold on a second. Where can I take advantage of this? Maybe through some more of the networking, working with networking partners, just changing your process and saying, hey, listen, part of our process is that our initial call is a Zoom call, you know, and where you insist on seeing the person. You don't let them get off of the hook. When you think about it, you know, back in the old days, you may have had a phone call. Okay, let's have an initial 10-15 minute call to see if there's reason to talk further. You can do that. And then at the end, okay, well, next step, it seems like it makes sense to talk further, is I set up a Zoom call, Teams call, whatever you use. And so we can actually do that. You act as though it's a foregone conclusion. And surprisingly, people will say, oh, well, okay. And that way you don't relegate yourself to just on the phone and you're wondering what kind of gestures are they making, what are they doing. You can't read anything. You want to get in front of people as much as possible. And, you know, quite honestly, hey, if it's digitally, that is fine. They need to see you. In fact, here's another thing that that mindset will stop you from doing. It can stop you from saying, okay, well, how do I use these tools better in prospecting? What can I show them, you know, that isn't like this 10,000 page book of resources, but what can I have ready or at the ready on this Zoom call? Hey, listen, so and so, I like to share my screen with one thing that's key to address the question that you have. And so it's about changing how you look at things and actually, you know, as trite as it is, figuring out, well, the glass is half full. Now, how exactly, what can I use in order to make this experience, to take it to the next level and not miss a beat?
Yeah. You know, it's funny you said the old days, like January of 2020, right? Those were there were the old days. Phil,
Right.
you work with a lot of CEOs, and so as James maybe works with people who are sales professionals, CEOs aren't always sales professionals. However, they do network in mastermind groups, executive groups. In the old days of before pre-COVID, they would get together at resorts and all of that and network that way. When we heard Doug Hall, you and I interviewed Doug Hall. Doug mentioned that his initial head trash, he didn't use that word as James did, but well, I can't hold these, I can't do these virtually. And he said he completely shifted. What kind of shift do you see CEOs making, or must they make, to help them in their own networking?
Yeah, with my clients, the biggest challenge that I'm seeing CEOs deal with is keeping their team engaged. So if they're working from home, working remotely, or a quarter of them are in the office, there's a lack of information exchange, which is definitely impacting productivity no matter who says what. There's definitely a downshift in productivity. And then the other is some people don't mind working from home. I've got 2 dogs barking in the background right now. So those are some of the challenges. But really keeping their team engaged. And so the CEO is dealing with his or her direct reports. And then those direct reports, middle level management or whomever, they've got to stay connected with the front line. And so when I'm coaching them, I'm telling them you've got to check in with your team individually at least once or twice a week, ideally once as a group together, and you're debriefing with some social banter, one of my new favorite words, and then definitely one-on-one for really a social, stay connected, how are things going. So they've got to be proactive, even if they're uncomfortable doing it, and some of them are definitely not that outgoing, right? So that's a push for them, but it's definitely going to allow them to stay more connected, engage with their team better, and then as the talent pool expands geographically, because we might not need to actually live somewhere where we're working, then they're going to have better skills to attract and retain and engage with that talent.
So Michelle, you are the epitome of that small business owner that's got really a great business model in what you do, and you've got a team behind you, but you probably, and I'm going out on a limb to say this, you're probably the rainmaker still of the business. You're still the one who's in the provisors group like we are and meeting people. What's been your biggest aha moment in this for you, just on business development, biz dev, for you as a small business owner that is the chief rainmaker in addition to being the founder?
It's a great question. I think the aha is kind of this big picture that everyone's talking about, that the ability to connect despite not being together. I think we just have always assumed that that is necessary. And I agree with Phil that it is definitely needed, but it's not as though it's exclusive. And what I've been really fascinated by are the creative ways that networking organizations have brought forward opportunities for people to connect. So for instance, I'm involved with an organization called CAMPS, which is the Center for Advanced Manufacturing Puget Sound. And we used to have, your regular monthly, everybody gets together in a room and there's a guest speaker, or there might be a plant tour that you have to travel out to, Lake Tapps or Arlington or, pick your spot. But going back to this time that it takes to do that and the commitment, which there's real value to, but it's also really hard as a business owner building an organization. And so Camps, for instance, was able to do their factory tours virtually. So someone would walk through with their phone, capturing what's going on. And the folks on the screen were able to ask questions and engage in not quite a personal way, but in a way that was meaningful still. And I think, one of the things that I found with larger groups is really encouraging smaller group connections. So you mentioned provisors. Provisors has always had this troika concept. So it's a group of 30 plus people, but where a lot of the connection comes from are the small 3-person kind of breakout groups. And the creativity of how do you take Zoom and make it meaningful from a connection standpoint on a business, the content of business, but then as Phil mentioned, also the social piece as well. So how do you make it interactive? How do you make it meaningful and authentic rather than this distance that we feel from Zoom? So those are the things that really have stood out to me this year as I've kind of been engaged in different groups and watching how they have tried to shift their environment to stay connected with their members.
Well, we thank you very much to all of you. We got to stay connected with our title sponsors, which are all of you. So we're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors and about them. But when we come back for the hot or not section, I'm going to put all of our hosts on the hot seat. We're going to talk about what's hot or not in networking. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
The Seattle Shrimp Tank podcast is brought to you by our spotlight sponsors. James Alberson with Sandler Training, Michelle Barnberger with Equinox Business Law Group, Aljalyn Sperber with Ladybox, Phil Simchich with SME Wealth Builder, and Dan Whedon with Emerging Risk Solutions.
Thank you, Barb. That was awesome. And Phil's giving the thumbs up because Simchich was that's a hard one, Phil. She did that flawlessly, didn't she?
It was perfect. It translates to Smith, so it's actually easier on the other side.
Very good. All right, so everybody, I'm going to put you on the hot or not seat for some of these. So I'm going to let's see. I got to mix up the order a little bit here. How about I'm going to throw Phil. Phil, hot or not? Dogs barking in the background when you're trying to have a business meeting. Hot or not?
Oh, definitely hot. I know if Amazon's delivering or if somebody's at the door, our security system is live and working. I let the shepherd out first thing in the morning, open the door and tell her to do security, and shepherds love to scan. So she goes out and has a look around, checks things out, and comes back in. So and
Well, you
they're
know,
good for stretches
no,
and stretching during the day.
oh, and I got the same dogs issues, but here's what I guess I wanted to hear you talk about Lola and the dogs, but in reality, there seems to have been a relaxation on, hey, we got to be perfect. Everything's got to be perfect, and it doesn't mean that you have to take it for granted, but in reality, there's been kind of like, hey, we're all trying to live a life, and we've got things going on, and we've got kids, we've got dogs. uh, that's become a little bit hot, hasn't it? Or what do you think,
Yeah,
Phil?
you bet. Acceptable, and it's part of life, and we're a lot more relaxed. And my hobby was photography, so I'm delighted I get to use all my snazzy equipment and now say to my wife, see, I needed this. And so yeah, it's all good.
Good. James Alberson, my sales guy. Hot or not, those video emails that you get from people that sometimes you know, sometimes you don't, but video emails as a way to create better engagement from that type of correspondence.
I'm going to say hot, but I'm going to say hot with probably a ticking clock on it. If you're in sales and you haven't done that yet, it's kind of like Amway. Hey, you know what? You better get in on it on the ground floor, because after a while, it's going to go quote unquote out of style. And it's one of the things we talk to our clients about in being creative and using a lot of the great video tools out there for video prospecting. But then the other caveat is, how are you doing it? How well are you doing it? There's always, the higher echelon quality execution, and then I just threw something together and let's see what happens, right? And so I think when done right, when done with the right cadence and as a part of your overall approach, I think it's hot. Otherwise, let's go back to the way it used to be, I guess.
Okay. Michelle, you know how you get somebody new on LinkedIn and all of a sudden you get a request. Hey, they want to meet you. They got you here, let's get signed up. I've got this great thing. So hot or not, these LinkedIn message requests, 10 seconds after you've accepted the connection.
I think we'd all agree that that's not.
Okay.
There needs to be something tighter in that connection for that to be hot. Oftentimes it's someone who knows someone and makes an introduction. I think that's definitely a cleaner way to make that work, is to ask for that introduction, which is often awkward, but it's definitely a tighter way to reach out than something that's a real just cold outreach where there's no evidence of need.
Phil, hot or not, breakout rooms for Zoom calls and for Zoom networking events. What do you think about the breakout rooms?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. We have a monthly for the certified management consultants, and it's national. So when we get put into these breakout rooms, we get to actually know each other and hear each other's story and figure out what's going on. And that's easy in a room of 3, 4, 5 people for everybody to get some airtime. Whereas if you've got 30, 40 people on the call, only the extroverts are shining. So definitely hot for breakout rooms.
Okay. James, wearing a sports suit, a sports jacket or a suit jacket for video calls. So you're meeting up with somebody, maybe you have the shorts, the golf shorts on, and Phil's putting it on. So now James really on the spot. I know in the podcast this is bad radio, but the sports jacket look on a Zoom call.
Wow, all of a sudden I'm ready to do business with Phil just because he put on the sports jacket. I'm going to go with hot. Once again, I have all these caveats. I think it all depends on what the purpose of the meeting or the call is. I think on some level, when you look around and really pay attention, people have gotten a little too relaxed on Zoom calls, and you start to wonder, really, you showed up like this. So we still have to consider that the only difference here is that you can't reach out and touch the person, but they can still see you. And what kind of impression would you have made in person, from them seeing you, that you're not trying to make now? And so general rule, if you would have worn a sports jacket in person, then why on earth wouldn't you do it now?
All right. Michelle, hot or not, online schedulers like Calendly, and in addition, calendar invites to confirm.
Calendly is a lifesaver, by the way. If you don't use it, I really encourage you to look into it. And I use the real basic, simple version, and it is a lifesaver in its basic form. I know a couple of people who use it in a really extensive way and are able to schedule, bathroom breaks between Zoom calls, because they've been able to take Calendly and sort of schedule out different kinds of meetings with different timeframes. And I think that there's a huge time savings in doing that, not to mention your inbox, which gets full. How about this time? How about this time? How about this time?
So Michelle, I'm going to follow up. I'll have a really quick, my own hot or not on that. I got to tell you, it was Brad Berger, my former host with the Shrimp Tank, who finally got me, kept saying, you got to do Calendly. And I waited and finally I did it. And it has been a lifesaver. I can't imagine not doing it without, because the number of times I've put in an email as a follow up to another conversation, hey, whatever works for you, but I have a scheduler down below, and the next thing I know, it pops up on my calendar in a time frame. So I think we've saved 7 emails back and forth with time. So I'm all with you on that. So before we go to our final break, let me ask each of you. We all had a bunch of hots here. What is the biggest not to do? What is the biggest thing that you've seen? So you have a chance to think about this, Michelle, because I'm coming to you last. What is one of the biggest nots that you could give to all of our viewers and listeners? What not to do? Phil, let's start with you.
Eating on Zoom.
Okay.
It is just like, sports highlights when you see and they replay the injury in slow motion, and it's like, that's kind of that reaction.
Especially Phil, especially if the camera is pointed up your nose while you're eating. That's no good, right?
I tell you, well, and it's even worse if they've got a big window or something right behind them, so they're backlit, and now all we've got is shadow and food flying. Yeah, no thanks.
All right,
no
that's
thanks.
a good one. James, what about you? What's a big knot?
Oh, judging from a lot of the memes I've seen and that sort of thing, I think the biggest knot is to not realize that your camera is on, and camera or audio is on. That can make for a very embarrassing, uncomfortable situation. And so I'm going to go with that one.
So James, you just made me think of something. Our Rotary year just ended, and the president we had was fantastic. In fact, our club won the best Zoom meeting in the entire district, mostly because of his innovation. The last meeting that he had, because it was a changeover in presidents, he put together a montage of some of the best screenshots of people doing or not doing. I'll just leave it at that. And he had a title for each one. And some of them were just incredibly hilarious. And you just made me think of that one. Michelle, before we go to break, what's the biggest not hot for you?
I think it's not being aware of who else is on your call and kind of monopolizing the conversation. So there are still facial cues, gestures, body cues as to when other people want to talk. And so being really aware of balancing that conversation so that you're not the only one speaking through the entire Zoom call. I think that's one of those things that are really hard for some people to navigate.
Okay. Thank you. I've got one to throw, and I lied. I got one more, Barb, before we go to break. Here's one. If you're on a Zoom meeting, and I'm thinking of like our provisors meetings, because I just did this, be really careful that if you're trying to send a direct message, that it's being sent to that person as opposed to everyone. Fortunately, it wasn't. Mine was fairly innocuous, but yeah, be really careful that if you're sending that private chat, that it doesn't say everyone. So that's my not hot. So anyway, what is hot though is going to our last break. We're going to talk about or we're going to ask Barb to introduce us to our corporate sponsors. But when we come back from our break, I do have some plead the fifth for our hosts. So stick around. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, Kitsap Sun Newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now, back to the show.
Thank you, Barb. And this plead the fifth, my fellow host, was a lot of fun to put together. I have a whole bunch of them here. I may not be able to get to all of them, but let's see if we can do this. I'm just going to not confuse myself anymore. I'm just going to go back in the order as I see people here. So Michelle, I've got you first. What is the biggest faux pas you've seen someone else do? And you don't have to name that someone, but you've been in a virtual networking event. What's the biggest faux pas you've seen happen over the last year or so?
I think it's the comment that was made about not knowing that your audio or video is still on that James mentioned. And you shouldn't have to say, don't take your device into the bathroom with you.
I think that line in and of itself says it all right there. I think that says it all. Phil, what's your best hacks for avoiding Zoom fatigue and creating balance physically and mentally? We heard Shelley Golden on. James and I had Shelley on a couple weeks ago, and Zoom fatigue is real. What are some of your best hacks for avoiding that?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I'm using a DSLR camera, so I'm not looking at the computer camera. So you're all over here. So if I'm looking at you on screen, it's here. And so I'm constantly looking at the camera, often for 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And it's just to visualize that the camera is a person so that I'm looking and connecting with people so that we're on camera, so like any kind of TV or anything, you need to crank up your energy 10, 15, 20% so that comes through the camera and people can feel the energy. And another, look people in the eye. Always keep looking people in the eye, and then definitely take frequent breaks, but leave your phone in the office. Please.
Thank you. James, I saved this one because you, like I am, we're both golfers, and I'm going to use a golfing phrase here. So at some point, I bet you wish you had a mulligan in some sort of a virtual event or meeting. What would that mulligan have been? What did you do that you would have said, boy, I wish I could tee off again?
Oh, wow.
Or was there one?
Yeah, I'm maybe this is where I have to plead. I feel that there was one. So I guess what I would pick was, for whatever reason, for those who've kind of downloaded the Snap Camera app, you can, for meetings on the computer, you can put little hats on yourself or whatever. Right. So not on the phone, but the app on the computer. So for one of those virtual happy hours, I figured, okay, let's do that. I put some kind of festive, hat on or something. But then for the next meeting, I didn't know how to take it off. I didn't know how to deactivate the Snap camera. So I come on and, I wasn't late, but I was right on time. And here we go. I have some sort of Santa hat or some kind of hat on. It was now my customer understood, but still.
You weren't a cat though. Were you a cat?
I was not the cat.
You're
No, no, Your Honor, it is me. I'm not a cat, right? No, I was not that. But that has got to be the funniest meme that I've seen of the whole pandemic Zoom, era, if you will.
what I loved, and that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. What I loved about that is when he said exactly that, Your Honor, I'm really not a cat. Like the judge didn't know that. I thought that was great. All right, I'm gonna work in reverse order. You get 2 picks back to back.
Okay.
And again, because you're in the sales area, I like this one for you. What's your best idea for helping someone expand a market demographic in what we now have as an unlimited world? I mean, we can access anybody around the world instantly. Do you have any ideas for expanding networking outside of your own base?
I would say probably you have to be careful with that. I think in order to do that, you have the opportunity, but you have to have some focus. You have to have a laser focus. And I think the thing that comes to mind for me, I said on a presentation, another networking group about a month ago or so. I think if you haven't done so, one of the best things to do is to develop truly a niche or two that you really want to stick with. Since the universe maybe has opened up for you, how do you control that and be effective? And that's where you have to, sometimes against maybe conventional wisdom, where we want to throw the net wide and far, thinking we'll miss something. But the more the saying goes, the riches are in the niches. And so the more you actually think about, okay, I have this wider universe, but how do I become laser focused in the area that's ideal for me? That's one of the best things I think that one does, because then it will cause you to find those avenues that will help you get to those particular individuals in that wider universe.
I've never heard the riches are in the niches. I like that. That's a new one for me. That's great. Thanks, James. Phil, I want to talk some money. I know you like talking money. We talked with Rick Darrow and banking just recently. So let's talk a little bit of money. In a lot of sales transactions, they used to be in the old days, as we mentioned, somebody'd hand you a check. I mean, so to speak, like they'd hand you a check, or you start doing credit cards, but you take it, manually and all of this. Those who hadn't before had to figure out ways to get paid in a virtual world. For those that are still kind of struggling with the whole concept of that, what advice do you have for them as relates to making the whole transaction process simpler and faster from a monetary standpoint?
Sure, because money actually isn't that real right now, and it's digital and can move around very quickly. So number one, make sure you have a real contract, and Michelle can talk about contracts much more effectively than I can. But have a contract, and my contract specifically say project or whatever is not cancelable and there are no refunds, and then have the client sign that and send that back. And then there's lots of payment platforms. I tried using the biggest one that we're all familiar with, that rhymes with PayPal, and they were just too nervous about the contract and the size of the contract, so that ended up not happening. And so there's definitely ways to wire money, e-transfer money, accept credit cards, and automate some of your invoicing. So if you have recurring invoices and things like that, and Dan and I know we're both doing this, you can automate your invoices and make it easy for your clients to pay you by credit card online. It's all safe, it's all secure, it's all bank level encrypted, and that actually reduces our labor and increases the speed of cash flow.
Perfect. Thank you. Michelle, I'm going to talk a little bit, I guess it's kind of up the old legal framework here. I remember the days, especially in my, with working with insurance clients, where they would hand me their policies for review, and I'd take a stack of folders that were probably 2 feet high and have to review them. In a virtual world, we're all kind of getting used to trying to send large pieces of information across. What are your best legal thoughts as far as making sure that personal information is safe, that large documents, can be transferred. So you can actually, once you've finished networking and you may be able to do some business, what are some of your best advice on doing it safely, legally, and quickly?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think as consumers, we tend to be very comfortable with email, messaging, text, Dropbox, all these different tools out there without really thinking about what it is that we're transmitting. And fortunately, we don't think like the hackers. We don't think like the people who are trying to access this data. But that is certainly, a pitfall as well. So one of the things that we really work with clients on is understanding what it is that needs to be transmitted and what's the best way to do it and what is the most secure way to do it. And if they are uncomfortable dropping it off, for instance, because of the volume, or they have it scanned already, giving them the notice of what are the risks of transmitting it electronically. We also really talk with them about how we store things, where they store, because we do have a lot of sensitive information. An area that comes up a lot is when you're dealing with the IRS, Social Security numbers are come up very, very often. And so we never have someone email us or message us a Social Security number, for instance. So I think it's really an awareness conversation more than anything, awareness on our part, on what we're asking for or what they're planning to send to us, and awareness on their part of the risks in taking certain steps. So education, and then kind of just opening up that conversation so that folks know what the risks are and taking the steps that they're suggesting.
Hey, Michelle, quick question comes to mind as you talk about that. Is texting safer than email? So for instance, if I said, hey, I need to get your social security number, I don't want you to send it by email, go ahead and text it to me. Is that okay?
I don't know the answer to that from a technical standpoint, but we would typically recommend it via phone.
Okay. All right. That's good. Hey, listen, if you recommend it that way, that's how I'm recommending it. So as a final, I'm going to ask you, this is just a quick hitter. I've got one question that for each of you, and then we'll end our show for today. But I want to give you a scenario, and you just give me maybe a 10, 15 second answer on this because it's related to each of you. So if we came across a similar or a worse situation than we did in 2020, we couldn't leave our homes for a year, would your business be able to survive? And if so, what should others know that would help them? If your business were to survive, what do others need to know about how you've structured and set it up? Phil, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So in the old days, we used to show up with an Armani suit and my fancy briefcase from the Boston legal days. And so now that money is invested into audio, microphone, video for camera, and lighting. And like I've got 3-point lighting in here. And so we now have the opportunity, if not the responsibility, to look and sound good on Zoom on video. And so definitely look and sound as good as you can. Even to the point of having my, then teenage, not teenage daughters anymore, giving me makeup tips.
They've done a fine job, by the way, Phil. They've done a fine job. Michelle, what about you? Same question.
I would go back to Phil's comments earlier about managing the team. I think that it's pretty easy in a lot of cases, not every case, to pick up the technology and go home and plug into the internet and be able to function. I think where the biggest challenges are in sustaining a business is in that connection and culture for the team. So everyone's tired of Zoom happy hours and, the fact that there's no personal engagement. There's business engagement, but a lot less personal engagement. And so really being conscious of how to build community and vulnerability and authenticity among the team members.
Excellent. James, you get the last word.
So I'll ditto what they both said. And I would say, one of the keys, you have to be quick to react. Nimbleness would be the key. You have to let go of, well, I used to do it this way, so I should always do it this way, and be on the cutting edge of have the technology, have the creative thought to make sure that you keep the culture, and just don't get too locked into one way of doing things. And once you have that mindset, you'd be surprised at the ideas that come to you that will help your business continue to move forward and thrive in ways that you just never even thought of before.
Thanks, James. Hey, everybody, this was a ton of fun. James Alberson, Phil Simchich, Michelle Barnberger, thanks for all of your great work. I'm looking forward to next month and beyond for all of the great guests that we will be interviewing together. Hey, everyone, make sure that you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com Seattle, or wherever you get your podcast. We're all over the place. Our next show is going to be on Wednesday, July 7th. We'll be live streaming from our Facebook page. Michelle is on a run. She's going to be now 3 weeks in a row with us. She is going to be my co-host when we interview Kara McKeege from Pepper's Personal Assistance. I've done a little looking into the website, and I'm really excited to be interviewing Kara. We look forward to that. But listen, in the meantime, be safe, be well. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, keep cool, and most of all, be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.